Hello, my name is Pete and welcome to Local History of Cornwall. In this, my second video in the series, I've chosen to look at the mystery of the ghost cart of Gwithian. On doing so, I will cover the sandsifting operations on the beach there, which includes the various ways the sand was transported from the beach and along to the sandsifting works at Gwithian, the origins of Red River, and finally the production of tin's deadly byproduct, arsenic. Everyone has heard the stories about the ghostly minecart appearing out of the cliffs at Gwithian. Most of you have probably gone to have a look at it, but what perked my interest is how it can be associated with the sandsifting operations at the beach. The tin-rich sand fed by the Red River had to be transported to a sifting works where the tin could be extracted. Numerous methods were employed over the years, starting with horse-drawn carts going across the beach up until the building of a ropeway over a series of pylons suspending carts from the beach and along to the sand-sifting works. Our mysterious cart is believed to have played a part in this. However, the question that begs answering, in my opinion, is how can a cart from an aerial ropeway be seen to be appearing from a cliff face while sat on rails embedded into the cliff, and clearly nothing to do with any aerial ropeway? The answer to this mystery and more is answered in this video, so continue watching for the real reason
for the ghostly cart in the cliffs.
The Red River at Gwithian and Gwithian, although running as a normal river these days, once flowed red. Although it's known as a river, it really was just an industrial drain, carrying tin waste and its accompanying toxic components discharged by the many mines along its course. The river was fueled by the development of deep mining in the Camborne area, with vast quantities of waste material being discharged into it. This shot shows it a few years ago when it still ran red, and you can see from this aerial shot the river coming down and discharging into the sea. At one stage in relatively recent history, South Crofty had permission to discharge 750 tonnes of material into this river daily. Recovering the tin from the river was much easier and cheaper than trying to sink a shaft several thousand feet below the ground, and their treatment centre was set up for this purpose. It was built in the area shown here, which is known as Rockpool Restaurant, although it now appears to be called Lula. Until recently this restaurant was called the Sandsifter for that very reason. The area of the works, seen here in this picture from 1930, in which you can clearly see the chimney at the back, and that chimney is now evident in this modern picture here. The chimney itself served as a calciner, a kind of furnace to roast the tin ore to remove arsenic. Here you can see the opening where the arsenic would have been burnt off from the tin ore. It was soon found, however, that the sands of Gwithian Beach were more tin-bearing than the river that carried them there, and therefore changed the location that the works were concentrating on. This means that the previous canalising of the Red River caused some degree of difficulty for the tin sand works, as although the works were conveniently situated to source the power of the river, it was no longer close to the tin-bearing sand. Therefore, varied ways of getting the tin sand to the treatment plant were developed, and these would become more and more sophisticated and mechanised as the works developed. The main difficulty in reaching and recovering the deposits was that between the deposits and the works was an outcrop of rocks, a rave-cut platform that prevented any wagon, horse-drawn in the first instance, from accessing the area other than at low water, with a narrow window of opportunity to recover tin sand before the rising tide made this impossible. Here we can see the said gap at the left of the rocks, and although it looks quite wide at the moment, this was filmed at very low tide. This tidal issue meant that not only was the plant not operating at full efficiency, it was sometimes dangerous, with the horse and cart being swept away on at least one occasion. However, a solution was found. Utilising a skill well practised by the Cornish, a cutting was created through the platform, making use of the many redundant and available miners of the time. This area, known as Sheep's Pool, was then created, allowing passage for the horse-drawn carts. Clearly this made an immense difference to the amount of tin sand recovered on any tide, and the distance covered was marginally shorter, and the recovery could continue from shortly after the tide began to drop until it regained that point again, possibly doubling or tripling the time available to work. Several slipways were cut out of the rock to allow the horse and carts to get onto the beach, like this one by Gwithian. Recovery of the sand in this manner, although improved, was still fairly basic. Eventually, a series of pylons were constructed along from the treatment works across the dunes and to the spot at the top of the cliff nearest the area of the richest deposits. These supported an area ropeway carrying a continual line of buckets from the source of the treatment works. Here an old photograph shows a ropeway with the buckets quite clearly. And again here displayed on an early postcard from the area. Here we have the bases, which is all that was left of the pylons a few years ago when this photograph was taken. And here are the same ones today. You can see that one has since toppled over. There were of course numerous sets of these bases or supports, and this set can be found to the left of the Gwithian car park as you stand looking out to sea. And these another set are to the right of the same car park. On reaching the point on the cliff top nearest the area of the richest deposits, there would have been an engine to drive the mechanism. From there, a line secured around the cliff top would have led down to an anchor point in the rocks. This would have driven the ropeway. This idea was to drive a tunnel from the beach to the cliff top terminus of the area of the ropeway, and this would enable wagons full of sand to be pulled to the cliff top more efficiently than the spur down to the beach that was in use by the area of the ropeway. Again, using Cornish mining expertise, a tunnel was driven. The beach access to this was through the entrance of a cage-looking structure on the beach, the entrance to which had doors of iron on it, and they was locally known as iron doors. Unfortunately, the cliff profile was actually made of blown sand, and this caused the project to fail. It's due to even more erosion on the top of the cliff that we can now see the acclaimed abandoned wagon. It's just waiting for even more erosion to bring it down to the beach. So our cart was never part of an area roadway, but instead part of a failed attempt to better said roadway, explaining how it got there and why it's on rails. Shaking tables were used to extract tin from sand through a process called gravity separation. The raw tin oil, mixed with the sand and other materials, was first crushed and washed to remove impurities. The crushed oil was then fed onto the shaker table, and the table would then vibrate. Water would flow over the surface, and the combination of vibration and water flow created a fluidized bed of particles. Due to the differences in density, the heavier tin particles would settle at the bottom of the table, whilst the lighter sand and other materials would be washed away. The concentrated tin particles would then be collected from the bottom of the table for further processing. This method was effective because tin has a higher density than most of the other metals it is found with, allowing for it to be separated efficiently. So let's talk a little bit about arsenic. Arsenic is a byproduct of the tin. The grain in the rock is the arsenic, apparently harmless in this form, becoming poisonous when ground into a powder. Although I have heard conflicting opinions on this and personally would not go anywhere near the stuff. So what is arsenic and where does it come from? The Cornish mining industry is not just about tin and copper, although this may be mostly the case. Other materials have also been of great importance to the industry, and one of these is arsenic. In fact, it could be said to have been the factor which rendered 20th century mining in Cornwall viable. Arsenic treatment has had a long history in Cornwall, although for most of the time it's considered merely as a nuisance to be expelled from the dressed metallic material. A burning house structure made of large granite blocks, topped by a moorstone, would have been utilised, the working part resembling a common oven with a chimney. At the front, a man with a coater rake controls the quantities to be placed into the oven. Later, in 1817, arsenic was viewed as a commodity which had a marketable value. Mines troubled with arsenic in their ores were encouraged to build collection flues into their burning house arrangements so the product could be saved for sale. Here at the Sandsifting works at Gwithian, we see the chimney stood in the area of the old sifting work. An extant chimney, 1.75 metres at the base and an estimated 15 to 18 metres high. When the tin works finally closed, the area was taken over by the Pentland Sand Works. The lime-rich sand was recovered for many years, and some of this was sold for agricultural purposes, but vast quantities were taken by rail to Plymouth for the extensive rebuilding needed after the bombings of World War II. When most of the usual sand was exhausted, the plot was acquired by the Cornwall Council, who enabled a lagoon to be built, and it is now a local nature reserve. If you found anything in this video interesting, then please consider clicking, liking and subscribing. Oh, and please don't forget to do the bell thing if you want notified of any upcoming videos. Thank you for watching, and I do hope to see you on the next one.
Ropeway hums back to the